Welcome to Inside the Sports Car Paddock on the Marshall Pruitt Podcast, brought to you by Cooper Tires and the Justice Brothers. We have 3 guests for you this week. We open with our standing date, our good friend, Race Engineer Supreme, Jeff Braun from the Core Autosport IMSA DPI program. We're talking about driver feedback, topic we've covered before on the show, but there are so many nuances to it. Honestly, it's something that Jeff, as a current decades-long engineer supreme, and your host here, a former race engineer minus the supreme part, definitely can tell you that there are many ways that drivers and engineers interact, some of them effective, some of them not so. Jeff gives us the inside on what he wants from a driver. So while this might not be the learning hardcore things about engineering episode, since you will most likely be working with drivers if you have aspirations of being a race engineer, or if you are a driver who's wanting to know how to better communicate with your race engineer, Jeff gives us the inside story. Second on the list, we have our friend Jack Hawksworth from the Vasser, Sullivan IMSA GTD program, the Lexus RCFs. Jack spent last weekend becoming a NASCAR Xfinity driver at Mid-Ohio with the Joe Gibbs racing team in their Toyota. Had to speak with Jack about that. Some real fun there. And also his thoughts about wrapping up the 2019 GTD Championship, where, how high, what he thinks the Vasser Sullivan team might be able to achieve, as it appears the title is all but sewn up by their rivals at Meyershank Racing. Then we close with Steve Bortolotti, moving a bit north to Canada with Steve in GTD as well. Steve runs the Pfaff Motorsports team, winners of the last 2 rounds in their glorious lumberjack liveried Porsche 911 GT3 R. So we go from Jeff to Jack to Steve, and that is our show for the week. And as we start to wrap up with Steve, you'll hear the music fade in, and that's the cue that we are done. Until next week, thanks again to Cooper Tires. Thanks again to the Justice Brothers. And if you haven't already, please check out our MarshallPruittPodcast.com site. All the ways you can subscribe. More than 600 episodes waiting for your listening enjoyment. And off we go with our pal, a friend of mine now for almost 30 years, Jeff Braun. Jeff Braun, it's time to get smarter, courtesy of my favorite white-haired race engineer, that being you, of course. So we're going to do a topic that we have touched on before, but there's so many angles to race engineering, driver interaction, and so on, chassis setup, that we can keep finding these interesting little threads. And your idea was to discuss the various ways drivers communicate to engineers, what engineers are looking for from drivers in terms of communication, style, information, and whatnot, and also some different scenarios based on track needs that you would look for or hope to get different forms of feedback from drivers. Among those various options there, where should we start?
Yeah, it's maybe with what an engineer would look for in a test driver. And let's talk about testing, developing, and when I mean testing, I also mean practice sessions on a race weekend before an event while you're trying to set the car up and all of that. Anything short of actually competitive racing for position. And that's engineers, you always hear about engineer-driver relationships and how long they've been together and things like that, and being on the same page and understanding each other. But, and I think people kind of get that, it would be like a quarterback receiver or a quarterback coach or something like that. It's kind of the same thing. But I was thinking specifically what an engineer needs from his driver when we're practicing. And it's a lot of it is it might not be as engineering based as a lot of people would think. I don't need another vehicle dynamicist or a aerodynamicist or a guy who can explain all the formulas and equations and draw it out on a whiteboard for me. I don't need that guy driving it. What I really need is a guy who can describe what the car is doing in super detail, but not too much detail, because you can get lost with the amazing amount of detail. And what I've always said is, for me, the perfect driver is a driver who can guide his engineer. It's not tell him what to change. I don't want a driver come in and say, I need 150 pounds stiffer front spring and 3 clicks of rear low speed bump and the car will be perfect. That's not what I don't think any race engineer wants. But
now, let me ask, why not? Mm-hmm. Why not? And I mean, I know the reason, but why is that something you would push back against if you did start working with a driver who was effectively trying to solve all the problems for you, and, as we've mentioned before, turn you into a short order cook, someone at the McDonald's drive-through window?
Taking notes, right?
Give me a number 2 with a medium Dr. Pepper and a large fry.
Yeah, I think the main reason I don't want that is because I have spent the last, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years thinking about this car and what we're going to be dealing with this weekend and what direction I want to go. I've had if I'm in a big enough team, I've had my simulation people working on it, this puzzle for the last 2 weeks or between races. I've had my traction control guy and my assistant engineer going through different changes that potentially I think will help. And so collectively we have, anywhere from 2 to 5 people who have been thinking about this for 2 weeks. Chances are my driver is not just going to get it exactly right and know what we've gone through to change. Now, he can guide us, and that's what I need, is a guide of what direction. And I'll give a simple example. You could come in and maybe he thinks the car is too soft at the front, or it's moving too much at the front. Well, and that's what's slowing it down. That's what's keeping him from going quicker around a specific corner or a set of corners. The thing is, I may have 20 different changes that I could make to the car that would stiffen that or reduce that movement. What I need is some guidance. And I'm really asking my driver to try to eliminate some of the things. So if I have 20 things, if I can get him to say, hey, I think it's only, and the engineer has to ask the right questions. I could say, okay, it's moving too much. Is that when you put the brake on? No, I think it's when I turn the steering wheel, it starts to roll. Well, now I've eliminated half of my items that I could do, and I'm down to 10. And so if he can guide me toward maybe springs or shocks and get me down to 5 items, then I'll be able to select from our simulation work we've done, from my pre-planning that we've done. I'll be able to select what I think would be most effective of those 5 to give him what he needs. So a lot of good drivers will be very detailed at describing what they want the car to do and what it's doing, and describe that difference. They'll say, if you can get the car to do this, I can go much quicker. Or they'll say, I turn the steering wheel, I put a brake on, I turn the steering wheel, the car does this, but I really want it to do that. And now I have myself and my other people that are on the intercom listening, and we can come up with some quick pre-planned ideas that we've been thinking about for 2 weeks to kind of pull out and apply to solve that problem. Because I know if I can get the car to do what the driver wants it to do, he'll get the most out of it that he can. Until that point, he's going to be struggling and frustrated and annoyed that it's not doing what he wants it to do. And, with the level of drivers that I've been fortunate enough to work with, I know that if I get it to do what they want it to do, we'll be quick, because they're all fast guys. And so I need some guidance. I need some help. And drivers are so different in how they can describe that. Some are super visual. They'll want to sit down with the in-car video with me and just talk me through every corner. And they'll do slow motion, step by step, frame by frame. See what I'm doing here? See when I turn the wheel? See, I do this, but the car does this, and they'll step through a couple more frames. Right there. See that? Back up. See it? Forward, back, forward, back, forward, back. See that? That's what I don't want. Well, that's great info. Other drivers are more like kinesthetic. It's a feel thing. I can feel it fall over. I can feel it roll. I can feel it do this. Again, fantastic info, because I'm trying to fix the car, not necessarily to make it go faster based on what the simulator says or what my calculations say, because it's important that it do what the driver want it to do. So I always ask my drivers, describe what it's doing, tell me what you want it to do, and let me work on it.
So one of the generalisms about management, and this isn't specific to motor racing, but you'll hear it in any office setting, any kind of setting where managing of multiple people and personalities is required, and that is, you have to adapt. You have to adjust. You cannot manage and lead an entire group with each person spoken to and handled in an identical manner. Well, you can, but you are not going to be bound for success. Ultimately, some people need a little more coaching. Some folks need some more flowery words to get the best out of them. Some don't care. They're just mission, target oriented, save all the fluff. Tell us about how that dynamic does or does not play when we're talking about race engineer interacting with drivers or maybe even new drivers. Because I would think, Jeff, while there'll always be a little bit of accommodating, I would think you would be spending time, if needed, to say, hey, so you're giving me the car's dynamics broken down into 5 millimeter increments going around each corner. I don't need that. Or you're giving me super generalisms. I don't need that. I'm curious where the coddle the individual plays from a race engineer's standpoint, or how much you try and standardize folks coming at you with different communication styles to make sure that you get what you want. You're effectively training folks to give what you need.
Right. I mean, that's exactly right. And as you say, everybody's different in how they describe things and how they do things. And I would say the best example is if I have a young driver who's not super experienced and, coming out of the lower formulas or lower ranks of sports car racing, then I look at it as my job, and it's a selfish job. If I can get him to be better at it, I'll be able to make the car go quicker, and we as a team will do better, and he'll go faster, and everybody will be happy. So I find a lot of young drivers trying too hard. It's if you can drive a car quickly, you get some of these blazing kids come out, and if they can drive it quickly, just describe what it's doing. Don't try to be the engineer. Don't try to give me all the details. And so I'll tell them that, I'm not going to, I'm doing them a disservice in that situation if I'm coddling them or if I'm adapting to them, because they're going to go to the next step and the next step or to the next team and not be able to work with their engineer to set the car up. So I'll explain what I want, and a race engineer, a skill of a good race engineer, I think, is to be a very good question asker. You have to ask the right questions that kind of draw that out of the driver, not give him the answer so that he answers what you've just told him, but inquire into what he's feeling, what he's doing, what the car is doing, and ask maybe a question in two different ways, 5 minutes apart. See if you get the same answer. Not to test him. You're not trying to trick him, but he's describing a very, a very non-scientific thing. He's describing a feel and a sense, and things are happening very fast. So you have to ask the right questions of each driver. And as you start to learn the drivers, sports car racing is a great example. You can have 3 or 4 different drivers. I've had some that are really close, and I wish that I could have drivers that describe things very similarly, because it just makes the job easier and better and more effective.
Sure. But
a lot of times, like you said, you have drivers with different backgrounds. Somebody comes out of, 10 years of GT cars and ends up in a prototype with another driver who's been 10 years in a prototype. They'll have different ways of describing things and different levels. What's rolly for one guy, for the GT guy or for the prototype guy, might not be rolly at all for the GT guy. So you have to race engineer has to adapt as well to kind of calibrate his feeling, because one guy says, wow, the car's really rolling. The very next driver says, man, the car is just bolted to the ground, doesn't move an inch. You're like, well, that can't be. Somebody's wrong. Not necessarily wrong. The race engineer has to understand the background of the driver, and then ask more questions and try to draw that out of the driver, specifically, and understand his background and his history.
So knowing that we have, I guess, native, if you want to say that, native ways of looking at conversations, how the flow needs to happen back and forth so that you can get what you need. It's interesting, Jeff, and this may be another area to explore. It really is a one-way thing, meaning you need the drivers to give you what you need to make the car better for them. You don't necessarily need to do the same in explaining every little thing you'll be doing after they've given you input. While it is certainly a two-way relationship, there is a little bit of selfishness here. I need you to tell me how to make the best recipe. I'm not necessarily then going to waste a lot of time telling you how I'm going to cook the dang thing. Right. It is, and again, I can speak from my own experience, but tell folks about that relationship, because while you want to be the nicest, most welcoming, tell me everything type person, there's also an aspect of, look, I got work to do. Don't expect me to sit here and then run back every single thing I'm going to do, and why and how and what it should do here, there, and everywhere. There is a little bit of selfishness involved.
For sure. And the good drivers understand that, and they don't really, good and experienced. The older they get, the more they're like, they know how this is going to work, and they expect it to work that way. I've always been one to be, hey, I'm going to make some decisions here, and they're going to be time-sensitive decisions. And I want you to ask any questions that you have, and why I'm doing it, what the thinking behind it was. Ask those questions, but also understand you will likely get during the weekend the answer of, I can't explain it right now. Let's talk about that later. We'll always come back to it. I'll never blow them off, because if my driver gets smarter and understands why I did something in one direction, and he's smarter, he will be able to give me better feedback and understand why that worked and why that didn't work. So I want him to get smarter, but under the time conditions, a lot of times we just gotta go. And along those lines, this is a debate. I think we might have touched on this, but depending on what kind of driver I have and what my relationship over time has been with them, I will, and I bet half the race engineers would disagree with me on this, maybe more, about telling a driver what change you made and what you expect it to do. Again, we're not trying to trick the driver, but if I make a change to the car to try to solve his problem, I will, with Colin especially, but with any of the top pro guys that I run, I will tell them, here's the change I've made. Here's what I expected to do. And then I'll say something like, please focus on that in this particular corner. Because, and then I let them go out. But the reason I tell them that is because if I can hyper focus them on this change and what I expected to do, and they come back and say, yep, I paid super attention to it, and it did not do that. Definitely did not do that. Then I'm much smarter. If I don't tell them and just say, okay, go try this, and then they come back into the pits and I say, well, how was it? And they say, well, I don't know. It was
good.
About the same.
That's the worst. We've said this before, but that's the worst response ever. Good.
Right.
Good. All right. You've just given me an absolutely nothing burger here. That's not going to help me do anything.
Right. Exactly. So that's why I'll focus them on it. And some engineers will say, oh, but then you've given them the answer already. And, this isn't a test. This is the two of us trying to get better and understand whether it was better. And I want to know if specifically it helped this area of the car in this particular corner. And if it didn't, that's as great an answer as if it did, because we're trying to cut these 20 changes down to the one that works. And I may try a change that's not designed to specifically absolutely solve his problem, but it might be free practice one, the second change of the weekend. And if I do this change, it's going to eliminate half the changes I had programmed for the weekend immediately. And we can move on to other things. And so I need a really good answer from that. And I need him to really be sensitive to that area and that change and understand whether that's better or worse. So I like to tell my driver what it's going to do. And some of the best drivers, when we're testing, a lot of times will even tell me if it's let's say we're trying 3 different aero bits on the front of the car, and he's seen them all because the mechanics had them in their hand. Sometimes, I'll give a better example. I had Alan Kowicki and I were running stock cars, and there was a test we were doing with different shock absorbers, and he could see them because they looked different, and he would come in and purposely close his eyes while we put the shocks on the car so he couldn't see what they are because he didn't want to be influenced. Now, and this was a top guy. This was when he was at the top of his short track career just before he went NASCAR racing. And
wow.
And he didn't want to be influenced. He didn't have a preference for one or the other, but he had seen the dyno curves. Him and I had run them on the dyno. Him and I had built them ourselves, and he just didn't want to know. And there were times when I remember one time, it's my British mechanics always call it rattling the wrenches, where we went in and we picked the shocks. We went under there, we took a couple bolts out, put a couple bolts in, okay, Alan, go. And we changed nothing. It was the same shocks. We just took some bolts out, rattled the wrenches under the car, and then he had to give us the answer. In that double, triple bolt, that was valuable, we thought. But when we're trying to hyper-focus a driver on a specific aspect of the handling of a car in a specific phase of a corner, then I want them to really understand what I'm trying to do and what I expect it to do, and then give me an honest answer. And oftentimes, I can't tell is the best answer.
Honesty is a lovely, lovely thing. I know it's something that practice happens a lot in lower categories. Open wheel often, training series, the very early training series on whatever ladder to Formula One, IndyCar, etc., where teams will take a young driver, often fresh out of karting or just fresh in general, and make changes and not tell them what it is. Sometimes they make no changes. There's a placebo change. And just to get the driver familiar with, I've come out of zero suspension. You basically, you could add some cross weight through what you tighten or don't tighten on a kart. You can adjust tire pressures Obviously, there's some minor things you can do, but for the most part, an anti-roll bar to play with, or shock settings, or ride height, or name a variety of things, spring rates. These are all things that are new. And so rather than take the long trip, a season or 2 or 3, of just these things happening naturally, and the driver slowly adding them to their mental database, one of the great things you can do, and has been done for many years, is just this. All right, little Billy, today you're not setting a single lap meant for lap time. This is entirely about, you're going to learn about what this feels like, what that feels like, and then towards the end of the day, we'll start talking about what it is you're feeling and what we changed to do that. And we'll keep working on this so that you at least, you know, the feeling instead of the actual change or mechanical component that was altered. And so it's training your behind, training your hands and feet, not trying to put numbers and, you know, equations in your head. Let's just get your body attuned to a feeling or a variety of feelings, and then we'll come back and add in and this is what caused it part. So fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I remember Colin and I did a whole one solid day at Thunder Hill in a Formula Renault when he was just out of karts, and all we did was change front roll centers, which is the geometry of the front of the car, and rear roll centers, the rear geometry. And we tried about 5 different front roll centers and 5 different rear roll centers and combinations of all of those. And because I said, if you can tell your engineer that, no, I don't think it's the springs, and it doesn't feel like the anti-roll bars, it's not even a shock, I think the roll center needs to be changed. It feels more like a roll center than any of those other things. I said, if you can do that, you will have a huge advantage over all your other competitors, all the other guys your age, you know, all the other 14-year-olds racing Formula Renaults. You will have a huge advantage. So let's go out and we'll spend a day and we'll just work on roll centers. And here's the geometry. Here's what it looks like. This is a 42 millimeter front roll center. Go drive it. Okay, got that? Now, here's the geometry. Get out of the car. Here's the geometry. This is a 58 millimeter front roll center. Go drive that. And, you know, you get smarter kids who are faster and able to set their car up better and win more races for you. And that's what we're all after.
Well, we've got a few more components we were thinking about discussing. I think, Jeff, since we've reached almost 25 minutes, let's save those other angles of race driver, race engineer communication for a future recording.
Awesome.
Knowing that we have what you're looking for communication style and feedback wise in practice, qualifying, and race, and those being 3 very different things. Yeah. We have another topic as well, hopefully we will remember them, of actual communication ability with drivers. Yeah. And in some cases, we know there are some drivers, some who've won championships, Indy 500s, Rolex 24s, Sebrings, Le Mans, you name it, and couldn't tell the front of the car from the back of the car from a engineering standpoint. And then there are some who can actually feel a lot of things, but aren't necessarily adept at communicating those things. So someone who actually can provide decent feedback, but someone like yourself or myself back in the day would have to work with the driver and really parse through their ability to just simply communicate. Not a functional grasp of the language, just how do I translate what I was feeling into useful words for my engineer? That in and of itself can be an education and journey. So
absolutely. And then they'll probably be Italian or French or German. And then it makes it worse.
Or Californian dude, or who knows where.
Right. I've had those guys too. Yeah, exactly. It's like Robbie Groff one time told me at Milwaukee, we're whipping around at Milwaukee in an Indy Lights car, and he comes in and I say, how is it? And he's like, oh, man, I don't know, dude. His car's just not talking to me yet. I'm like, all right. Yeah, cool. And
Well,
Robbie Groff was one of the best Indy Lights oval racers ever, but the car just wasn't talking to him yet. And so I was like, all right, dude, let's do more laps. It was great.
Maybe that was the Robbie Groff scale, dude. You know, if the louder dude equates to a bigger change. All right.
Right. All right. Oh, that was a chill Californian that could rip on ovals. It was fun. So anyway, yeah. Another time, another story, another episode. I can't wait.
All right. Well, enjoy your testing tomorrow, my friend, and look forward to speaking next week.
Sounds great. Looking forward to it, Marshall, and I can't wait. Our list of topics are growing, which is awesome, because then we can do this more often.
You know, Jack, I've been trying to pinpoint that accent of yours. Little did I know it was Charlotte, South Carolina, not the UK. You're driving NASCAR last weekend, my friend. And you're driving the wheels off of things for Joe Gibbs Racing. How'd it feel to be playing in a totally different background than IndyCar, IMSA, prototypes, GTs? I got to imagine your head was spun a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, to be honest, it was a little bit unexpected. It all came about very quickly. Only found out Tuesday last week prior to the race. I'd obviously watched bits of NASCAR and stuff like that, and was intrigued, to say the least, when the opportunity came around. So it was very, very interesting. It was surreal, to be honest, to be walking into a paddock where you don't recognise anyone. The only person I knew there, driver wise, team wise, prior to arriving, was Austin Cindric.
Huh.
When you're in the IndyCar and the IMSA world, it's the same guys you see floating around in general, as you well know. So whether you're in IMSA or you're in IndyCar, there's a lot of kind of familiar faces, and it was a unique experience to walk into a paddock and literally it almost felt like my first time in America again, where I was coming in, really not knowing anyone, not knowing any of the teams, not knowing any of the people, but it was it was an amazing opportunity, and absolutely loved it. The Joe Gibbs team made me feel extremely welcome straight away, and had a blast. And the vehicle itself, so different to anything I've ever driven before. I can't. Anyone who's not had the opportunity to drive a stock car on a road course, I can't tell you how different it is to the I guess the more conventional open wheel kind of GT machinery that I guess the side of the paddock I've grown up in is used to, and it was surreal really to step into that environment, and great opportunity, and absolutely loved it.
So saw my friend and I believe one of your former competitors or rivals, Ryan Eversley, was there this weekend at Mid-Ohio, but he was driving in the Stadium Super Truck Series, and I'm watching him and I'm thinking, this must be what it feels like for Jack, going from racing a 18 million pounds of downforce Indy car at Mid-Ohio a couple years ago to an Xfinity car, Toyota, that is, by comparison, probably rolling and feeling like it's jumping through the air compared to that running, half an inch off the ground, glued, your forearms exploding from just trying to turn the wheel. Tell us about the experience of getting to know this Xfinity machine that I'm thinking dynamically, Jack, just had to be like, oh, really? Huh, okay.
It was like a different world. I didn't expect it, to be honest, because obviously, initially, I was driving open wheel cars. As you touched upon, I've driven Indy cars at Mid-Ohio before. Then I moved to GT3 cars, and that's what I've been racing the last few years. And the jump from IndyCar to a GT3 machine is pretty big in terms of, obviously, in IndyCar, you have so much downforce. Everything about the car is designed for racing. You jump into a GT car, quite a bit heavier, less downforce, mechanically just less advantageous for racing. And that was a pretty big shock initially when I got into a GT car from an Indy car. You have to adjust your style. You have to calm everything down a little bit. Everything takes a little bit longer to take a set and stuff. So that was a big jump. But the jump from a GT to a NASCAR is 5 times that. Like the weight of the vehicle, the braking zones, the corner speeds are just so different. You have to be. If you try to even push remotely close to kind of GT levels of performance in terms of try to brake at a similar point, you would just fly off the track. Like, you really have to back everything up. I can't tell you how it was strange psychologically, because I'm used to going to mid-Ohio and you see the braking boards going into turn 4, you see the braking boards going into the keyhole. In GP car, maybe you brake at the 300 or the 200 in an Indy car or whatnot. In NASCAR, you don't even reach the braking boards. You have to brake that early. So it was surreal, completely different, and far more of a difference than I expected. It was almost double, triple the kind of jump when I went from an IndyCar performance level to a GT performance level, and then to go to the NASCAR performance level. It was like another world. But then the crazy thing about it is you've got so much horsepower, right? So you've got more horsepower than you have in a GT3 car, but you've got 1/5, 1/10 of the grip. So completely different, but a lot of fun.
Other thing that it looked like, Jack, knowing that we were so quick in the car over a single lap. I mean, you picked up very quickly in practice, having never tested, never done anything. You're second in qualifying, I believe. I mean, just a rocket on individual pace. Then it seemed like in the race, which almost always happens at Mid-Ohio or any of the times where we have road course specialists come in for the first time, you'll learn a lot in a racing environment about contact, how much is too much, how much is too little. You learn about tire usage and management. If you don't have a spin, if you're not off in the grass, if someone doesn't turn you around, it's almost like you haven't done your first race properly, at least from the outside. Obviously I think I and everybody wanted to see you on the podium or something like that, but knowing how your race ended up, and maybe you can share a little bit about how the race went, I also came away saying, okay, he actually had the first race that he was supposed to. I hope the Gibbs organization, or who knows who else, might realize that, hey, when we come back next year or go to any other road course, we seriously need to have Jack Hawksworth on speed dial.
Yeah, it was wild. The whole race was, like you say, it's one thing putting a lap together, putting a race together. It's obviously a different thing. Certainly the tire degradation, that was that caught me off guard initially. And one of the things with the Xfinity series is, I don't know if it's the same in Cup or not, but between qualifying and the race, it's basically part Ferme rules. So how you qualify the car is how you race the car. It's not like you can adjust the setup between quali and the race. So other than tire pressures, and I guess you could do track bar potentially. But yeah, you've got what you qualify with, and I guess experience would tell me now perhaps should have been a little bit more conservative with the setup going into the race, based on the fact that the longer run is pretty important, even though there were so many yellows. And yeah, the race had a little bit of everything in it for me, to be honest. At the beginning of the first stint, I kind of lost my rear tyres a little bit. Was coming under pressure in third position. Got the bump and run, I think they call it, which was a little bit different to what I'm used to. Then we got going again. Had a good first stop. Then the second stint, there was a lot of kind of restarts, which was great because it allowed me to kind of get back into the fray of it. And the restarts I actually really enjoyed. I don't know if it was just kind of my road racing experience, but I was able to pick my way through and get back into the top three, and then eventually the lead. Then I guess they do this. There's a stage in each race. So then when the stage is over, you get the yellow. Anyone who watched NASCAR, so you get like this full course caution, and then everyone comes in and pits and does the next stage. But unfortunately, on that stop, we then had a little issue. And then after that, I just got into the wars, was pretty much had contact with 3 or 4 guys, got turned around again, went through the grass a couple of times, and that was that was all she wrote. But yeah, it had a little bit of everything in there. So certainly a lot of fun, and it was fun to race the other guys in NASCAR as well, because they race differently. Like in terms of aggression, there's a lot of nose to rear fender contact, which you don't really get in in IMSA and IndyCar. But where there's less contact, there's not quite as much door to door. I guess coming from the ovals, they tend to leave each other a lane on the outside a lot. So I found that you could hang around the outside of people easier than maybe you would if you're coming up against someone in IMSA or an IndyCar, where they would obviously just run you out of road on the exit. So the style of racing was different. It was aggressive, but aggressive in a different way. And it was just, completely different world. Completely different world.
Well, let's close on the inaugural Jack Hawksworth. Dang, this is a lot of fun, and I can't wait to do it again. Xfinity appearance. What was the situation like, Jack, after the checkered flag, coming to pit lane, climbing out of the car, talking with the team, maybe, I don't know, speaking with some of the drivers that you raced hard with? Just curious about the takeaway experience and maybe how you were received after completing your first race.
Well, I have to say, I felt welcome the whole time. I mean, the team made me feel very, very welcome. The other drivers were, and obviously, got bumped and run twice, but I guess that's to be expected. I think that's just part of the course in NASCAR racing. But off the track, everybody was really pleasant. I felt like the series, embraced me being there, and that side it was good. The strangest thing is the cars don't have any telemetry, and you're not allowed any onboard video. So when you come in from a session, I'm so used to diving into the data and picking apart, what's your teammate doing, understanding where you're fast on the circuit, understanding where you're slow on the circuit, being able to watch the onboard and say, right, okay, next session I'm going to work on this, and then hopefully I'll be able to go a bit faster. There's nothing. You have no data and you have no video, so it's a little bit like going to the go-kart track and just you come back to the truck. You discuss with your engineer, what the car did and what you're going to try for the next session. But there's nothing in way of telemetry or video.
What's for lunch? That's the big decision. What's for lunch?
Yeah, exactly. That was the most, for me, most bizarre thing about the weekend was not being able to come back into the truck and look at data and look at video, because I'm just so used to doing that. I've spent my whole car racing career looking at squiggly lines, and there was none. So completely different.
Well, let's move, Jack, and close the conversation on your primary job, your full-time job, that being a member of the AIM with Vasser Sullivan IMSA GTD program in your awesome Lexus RCF GT3s. Starting to get down to the close of the season here. There was a point, obviously, where you guys were extremely strong. You and your teammate Richard Highstand, you guys were certainly vying for a championship, have those 2 wins, of course, right now. You're sitting second, I believe, in the kind of the Sprint Cup version of the championship, but the full season long, seen some definite distancing to the entire field by the Meyershank Racing, the 86 Acura driven by Mario Fahnbacher and Trent Hinman. What's a mindset, Jack, going into these final rounds, knowing that the way IMSA's points happen to be delivered, if you're not within really strong striking distance, it's kind of hard to close the gap, and staring at almost 40 points behind the leader right now, it looks like you could get up into second in the championship. Not saying a championship's totally out of the picture, but what's a mindset knowing that, boy, it's really hard to overcome a significant deficit, even with 4 races left to go, the way that IMSA pays out its points?
Yeah, in terms of the overall championship, in GTD at the minute, I think it's a fight for second, realistically looking at the points, other than an absolute capitulation from the 86 car, which I think is unlikely. We're all kind of kind of fighting for second there. So obviously we want to do as well as we can in the overall. To do that, we need to win races. Potentially out of the last two, I'd say for us, the RCF should work really well at VIR, should work well at Road Atlanta as well. Laguna might be the only kind of slippery banana for us if we kind of judge upon previous year's performance. So potentially got two races which should be strong for us. One which is maybe not our best suited circuit. So we hopefully we can do enough to get second in the championship. We've still got a shot at the manufacturers championship for Lexus, and then obviously the Sprint Cup. We're very, very close to first position in that. I think that there's a driver, Robershaw maybe, who's switched between a couple of cars throughout the year, and he's currently leading the standings. We're second, a few points behind. So we have a real shot at that. So we'd like to try and win the sprint if we can, as I'm sure everyone else would. And I feel like we've got a good. I think we feel like we've got a good chance at that. The ABS team's been working really well all year. We had a good test there at Virginia a couple of weeks ago. So I'm super excited to get back in the Lexus. Having driven the NASCAR for a weekend, it'll be cool to get back in. You sometimes forget how lucky you are to drive these amazing cars that we drive, and the epic performance that they can put out. Because when you drive, something a little bit, let's say not quite as well designed for racing, or quite as sophisticated electronically, when you jump back in something like that, it gives you a real appreciation for the kind of cars we get to drive. So I think we should have a good car, and I know Rich has done a great job all year, so hopefully we can close with some strong results, try win the Sprint Cup, and like you say, maybe sneak up to second in the overall.
Throw one final thing at you here, and I'll do it in as graceful a way as possible. So someone who has watched you come over to the U.S., watch you do really amazing things in Pro Mazda, and move on up the road to Indy, get to IndyCar, I think make some really strong impressions there. Unfortunately, the last team you were with was just hot garbage, and unfortunately remains hot garbage that didn't leave you in the place you should have been. But you found an excellent home in sports car racing. You have done great things both in prototypes and GTs now, winning in effectively every class you've been in. Tell me about the state of happiness you're at with this Aim with Vasser Sullivan team, and also tell me about general happiness. I won't name teams, I won't name anything, but I know I've received some inquiries from folks saying, hey, Hawksworth, do you know if he's available? I love the fact that folks are still looking at you going, that's a guy to have. We want to have that guy in our team to win. Let's close on that, both where you're at now, happiness-wise, and how it feels to know that, I mean, hell, you're still a young guy, but you've been doing this a while, Jack, and you still have people saying, hey, if and when he's available, we want to talk.
Yeah, it's been, it's I think, about 8 years now since I came to the States. I think it was 20 when I came over to race Star Mazda, so it's been a hell of a ride. I've obviously raced a lot of cars, raced for some great teams, raced for some not so good teams, been in some good cars, been in some bad cars, so kind of experienced a full spectrum of everything, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, at this point in time, I have to say I'm very happy with Aim Vasser. Been great this year to get back on the top step of the podium. My relationship with Toyota and my relationship with Lexus, that's something which I really treasure. The guys there have become like a family to me, to be honest. And I love being able to represent, the team, the brand, and that's something I'm proud of. And I think when you really believe, believe in a set of people, and you feel like you're working alongside and with good people, it gives you that extra motivation. So at the minute I go to the track, and I don't just feel like I'm racing. You're racing for yourself. You feel like you're racing for the guys who are working on the car. You feel like you're racing for the brand, the people who are behind the team, are supporting the team. There's no better feeling than that. So I'm very happy with that. Obviously, I'm a competitor, and when I'm racing at the front, and I know the weekend in the Xfinity series, I love going wheel to wheel with those guys at the at the front on restarts, trying to make passes, trying to go forward. I've enjoyed trying to do that all year in the Lexus, and it's always great. I guess when people notice you're doing a good job from the outside, because it's a sport where I guess the outside view is not always reality, right? There's a lot that goes into winning a race, or goes into even in standing on the podium. But the guy who finishes 6th or 7th, he can have a great day, he can have a great performance. But to actually isolate one man or one athlete kind of and judge his performance is always difficult. So I'm grateful that there's obviously people that have noticed what I've done, and I'm happy where I am. But I always want to push forward, and at the minute I'm in a great position, and just looking forward to the future, looking forward to continuing to be competitive, continuing to become more rounded as a driver, become a better athlete, and hopefully stand on the podium again soon. It's been I won 2 in a row earlier this year, having not stood on a podium for a while, and now it feels like too long since I've been on the top step again. So I'm kind of one race at a time at the minute. Really looking forward to Virginia, and let's see what the future holds. But at the minute, I'm very happy, and just want to win some more races.
One of the many things I've always appreciated about you, Jack, your last win came in June. We're in the middle of August, and you're already bristling. You haven't had more. That's why people are wanting to hire you, my man. On top of the natural speed, there's no happiness or satisfaction if the last race wasn't a win for you. All right, my man. Well, thank you as always. Some funny stuff hearing about trying to wrangle an Xfinity machine, but glad to see so many positive things are happening for you in your career. And damn, I feel old realizing you're only 20 years old when you came over here when I was covering you back then. All right, Jack, look forward to seeing you soon here, brother. Steve Bortolotti, I got to tell you, it makes me so happy to see our lumberjack IMSA GTD team from the Great White North having success in IMSA. I'm telling you, if flannel is not, you can't BOP flannel. It is BOP proof. Tell us about the success that you and the Pfaff Motorsports team have been having here on your full season IMSA GTD debut, and what it feels like. Is this coming sooner than expected, later than expected? What's the general tone coming off back-to-back wins?
Yeah, thanks, Marshall. It's pretty cool. We know the lumberjack pride's pretty big here in Canada, but we I definitely wasn't expecting this run we've been on lately. That's for sure. We've we felt we were ready for this. I won't lie. We came into this hoping we would be ready to compete at the level we're at now, and we definitely had a difficult start to the season with the incident at Daytona and a bit of heartbreak there at Sebring, followed by a little bit more heartbreak at Ohio. So we felt the pace was there from the start. It was just competing at this level is so difficult. There's so many things beyond just the pace of the car and being fast that need to come together. So we were cautiously optimistic coming in, but at the same time, we definitely didn't underestimate the competition and truly how competitive the IMSA GTD field is. But, the IMSA ladder system we felt prepared us for, to be competitive in year one, and hopefully that, encourages other teams to make that jump from Cup ranks or Michelin Pilot Challenge into the GTD field.
And that's really important aspect that you mentioned here, and one I wanted to touch on right away, which is just that. It's not as if, granted, the team has had experience as a professional outfit, running high levels of GT racing here in the U.S., but this is call it ladder transition team. It's not something where you're parachuting in with trillions of dollars to buy the most opulent of everything. This is something where, as a unit, the Pfaff program has worked its way up, and I guess we could say graduated to where you are right now. Share some insights about that, because you are showing that you don't have to be insane in terms of, financial benefactors. This isn't something where only trillionaires and CEOs of Fortune 100 companies can come in and do this. I think you guys are demonstrating that, no, we're real people. We love selling cars. We love Porsches. We love all kinds of things, but this is attainable, yeah?
Absolutely. I mean, when I started with Pfaff, I was driving the pickup truck with a triaxle, trailer to events with our Porsche Cup team and, GT3 Cup Challenge Canada. So it was, it all comes down to the human capital we've acquired since that time. The core of our team is still those same four of us that used to pile into a Dodge pickup truck and drive to events with our triaxle trailer where we were the only team that didn't have a transporter. And then, as we found some more success and were able to talk to the powers that be at Pfaff into investing a little bit more, and proving ourselves through our results, we're so fortunate that the core of the team stayed together, through the transitions. We dabbled a bit in GT3 Cup Challenge USA, obviously predominantly had our roots in Canada, and you learn so much from your competitors, I guess. And the GT3 Cup Challenge Canada is extremely, extremely competitive because there are a lot of dealers, investing, money into the series and supporting young, talented drivers throughout the way. And, either you sink or swim at that level, right? You find a way to learn and get better and compete with them, or you find yourself out of it pretty quick. So thankfully we were able to have enough staff that was, I felt, intelligent enough to put a competitive car on the track, and we were able to do that and find some success with the GT3 Cup Challenge Canada, and then obviously some races that we dabbled in here and there in the United States when it was a bit too cold in Canada to be on track. And then we found ourselves here.
Let's talk a little bit about Canadian pride, Steve. And it's something that, as someone who has spent many years of his life racing throughout Canada, usually on the open wheel side. I've been there a few times to run like World Challenge GT team or do some engineering, but by and large, trips to Canada, whether it's French Canada, aka Practice France, but more Western English speaking, from British Columbia to Toronto, etc. Spent a lot of my life racing in Canada, and if you all would accept me, I'm sure my wife and I would move, but just absolutely love it. Know how much passion there is for racing in Canada. Can you share some insights on what it's like coming home as the winner, or just being, obviously, not only a positive representative of your home country, but having some real success? What have you felt among fans? Those who are connected to the Pfaff world there? What's it like coming down to the good old United States of America and putting in some good work and coming home with trophies?
Yeah, I think we as Canadians have this weird obsession with proving ourselves. It's never good enough if you're the best in Canada. You always have to go to the United States to prove how, if you're any good or not. It's like, it doesn't really count until you can win in America, right? So I think that's a cultural thing us Canadians seem to struggle with. It's like our version of little man syndrome or something, that we're not great until you can prove it in the United States. But it feels great to be a true, as Canadian outfit as we possibly can. We're based in Toronto 12 months out of the year. For Daytona, we were loading the trailer. It was minus 41 degrees Celsius when we were loading up our trailer to head down to Daytona. So that was, doesn't get much more Canadian than that, right? And predominantly our team is Canadian, so we do get a lot of support. When we return home, and even when we're around the airports, it's funny that how many people truly do follow the IMSA WeatherTech Championship. Obviously, being a fan of it, you tend to sometimes feel you're a bit too close to it to really understand how big of a deal it is to compete at this level as a Canadian team. But when you're sitting at the gate on that flight to Toronto and you're surrounded by Canadians, it's cool. And we're all in our Pfaff gear for people to check in and ask and say, hey, it's pretty cool that you're able to compete at that level and find success. It's been cool, but it's also, we're a little ways away from where we want to be. Obviously the last 2 races have been amazing, but we want to be there competing for a championship, not just for race wins.
Let's talk about drivers a bit. Steve, sure. Looking at the original full-time lineup this year, that's modified a wee bit, had some really solid support from Porsche Motorsport in terms of factory talent coming in and helping, whether it's for the long races, but also we've seen some of the young guns play a role even in the shorter races. Zach Robichon's obviously been a through line through it all. I believe Scott Hargrove is meant to return to the program here. Share some thoughts about the drivers that have been involved, and I'll admit to being a little bit weak on understanding the brief step back by Scott.
Yeah, so the situation with the drivers was something that wasn't planned from the start. We found ourselves struggling, through the first half of the season, and we felt that, we weren't pointing the fingers at Scott by any means. Scott's been a huge part of our program and how we got to where we are, and we owe so much of our collective success to Scott. But it got to a point where we were finding some struggles, and we were wanting to ensure that we were able to keep this program going long term with the board of directors here at Pfaff. We wanted to show them some success and ensure that we can put some pieces to the puzzle in that guaranteed, or not so much guaranteed, but gave us the best shot at proving that we're executing at a high level. And and to Scott's credit, it was not an easy conversation to have with Scott, and not to let him feel like he was a scapegoat by any means. Like I said, we owe so much of our success to him, and there's people who can handle that sort of bad news, if you will, and people who can't. And we're so fortunate that Scott didn't let that become a distraction within the team. We had him on site at Lime Rock and Road America. He was part of the team. He was one of our, a great crew guy as well. And I'm sure Scott, he's incredibly mechanically inclined. So it's like, now I got a hole to fill on my team. With him not having his physical labor around, he's got to go back to driving. But he does such a great job of, taking this as a learning experience for himself. And I don't doubt that he'll come back stronger. And, I commend him for not letting that become a distraction within the team, because he could have easily, been, why me, or poor me, everyone feel bad for me type of thing. But, he didn't. He was, he took it on the chin. He, stood tall and definitely was part of the team and was genuinely happy for our success. And I think that'll prove long-term throughout his career that, he's truly the guy we want as part of our program, and he's going to be, a successful driver for many years to come, barring this minor setback.
Let's close on a little bit of a personal note, which I just take great joy in. So one of your lead mechanics, I believe, crew chief, Gary Pennison, known him since he was about, I'm exaggerating when I say 3, but he was truly a young pup. His dad, Gary Pennison Sr., old family friend of Thomas Knapp, who worked for and worked with for many years, and from Atlantics to Indy Lights to IndyCar. And Gary Jr., well, his dad was our refueler when we debuted in the Indy Racing League in 1997, and Gary was a brand new rookie mechanic. One of the elder mechanics nicknamed him Jimmer. No idea why. I don't think it's stuck, but whenever I see Gary, I think Jimmer. It's just great to see him. I guess I'm in as equally as an unexpected place all these years later, reporting on sports cars instead of doing, being on the team side. But what's it like having this crazy Michigan product helping you out there? Because we loved him to death. We thought he was a nut, but I'm so happy. I just don't know how he fits in with the crazy Canuck routine.
Well, his nickname with us is Grandpa Gare Bear. So
Grandpa
he's
Gare
the oldest
Bear
guy on our team by a little bit. So he's our honorary Canadian for sure. He's been such a great fit. We met him through Joe LaJoy, who was our engineer last year. We were in a different series. He knew Gary, and when Gary found himself, looking for a job, Joe recommended him, and I respect Joe a ton and his opinion, and got to know Gary a little bit, and we found a place within the team where I felt I was weak and I could lean on his expertise, and he was a perfect fit with all my guys. You know, everyone on my team respects him and respects his accomplishments. He has a ton of accomplishments, as you very well know, and we definitely, lean on his success. And also, he's taught us a lot about, we don't always have to be the last team to leave the track, despite how hard, we want to work, and showing up prepared, how important that is. And yeah, I couldn't think, obviously Gary's been an incredible fit from a personal level, and he's become a personal friend, but at the same time, just helping our team level up we owe so much to Gary and his experience and just his ability to get the most out of people through his own personal experiences.
I love it. Grandpa Gare Bear. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm having t-shirts made as we speak. It's the best.
Perfect.
Well, Steve.
Yeah, Toronto Motorsports isn't far. We can pick them up and bring them down.
You know exactly where I'm going first. We got to get that made. I love it. Well, so happy for you, Steve, and the team. And I'm not over-serving this. Sports car racing, IndyCar racing is made all the better when we have truly successful Canadian teams involved and Canadian drivers. Just really makes me happy that beyond proving this is a team that can win and should be expected to win at every round, we're also bringing in our friends from the north to really just amplify where IMSA is going. So congratulations to you. And hey, got a couple more chances this year. We're not saying you're done, right? Not saying you're happy with 2 wins. I know you'd like to get 1 or 2 more, but great to see the Pfaff team step forward. Also great to see Porsche really embrace you guys as a very powerful new partner in IMSA's WeatherTech Sports Car Championship GT Daytona Paddock.
Yeah, thanks, Marshall. The folks at Porsche have been incredible. It's real customer racing for sure, and definitely allowing us to cut our teeth at this level, and hopefully we have a few more wins to come before the year's out.